What is going on, Pooch Crew? Thank you for being here for episode 71 of the Poojie Podcast. I appreciate you tuning in, joining, whether it's on podcast platforms or on YouTube. Thank you for being here to watch episode 71, and I'm excited for today's episode. This podcast started out by interviewing people, and here we are again with a fantastic athlete lined up for today's interview. I figured now would be an appropriate time to release this episode, given the fact that 90% of the country is in the middle of a deep freeze, and his sport revolves a lot around how cold the water can get. So he is excited to be here. I know that, and I'm excited to have him on the Poojie Podcast. If you're not already doing it, go follow us on all social media platforms and be sure to subscribe and notify on YouTube as well to help out the podcast. Help me out any way you can. I appreciate you being here. And speaking of cold weather and bad weather, Tampa Bay Lightning game postponed Thursday night in Dallas due to weather. Who would have thought in the middle of a pandemic, weather would be what postponed a hockey game? That is beyond me, but hey, I guess it's just 2021, right? 2020 never stopped. I don't know, but Lightning game postponed, hockey games are being postponed, basketball is rolling forward, college basketball is approaching conference tournaments. The world of sports is fantastic, and if you haven't already, follow our Instagram for Poojie Parlay 4-packs. Every so often throughout the week, they pop up pretty randomly, so be sure to go follow the Instagram to go win some money with the Poojie Parlay 4-pack picks. Parlay them, take them straight up, one-offs, whatever you want to do, and be sure to always submit your picks to me. I love to see what you guys are doing. I love posting them. I love giving you guys shout-outs. And if there's any athletes out there, anyone in the sports world that you think I should interview, let me know and I'll reach out to them and I'll interview them. Or if there's any topics you want me to discuss, similar to the Gus Malzahn to UCF video that I released a few days ago, let me know that as well. I love doing those short videos for the fans out there that like to listen, like to get my opinion on some of the things going on in the world of sports. So without further ado, thank you again for being here and enjoy this episode. As always, proudly sponsored by Cimarron Golf Club. Love what they do over there on County Road 210, just west of St. John's Parkway. And with a lot of sports coming up, be sure to go check out Strings Sports Brewery on Main Street, just north of downtown Jacksonville. They do a fantastic job there as well. So big shout outs to the sponsors, but enjoy episode 71. Thanks for being here. Our next guest joined the program, 2018 gold medalist, three-time U.S. national champion, formerly with Team Schuster, currently a U.S. curling ambassador, travels around the country to do some work with different curling clubs in the areas. And I just want to welcome him on. Tyler George, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. We got a lot of time on our hands nowadays, so it's fun to do this stuff.
It is. It's enjoyable to be able to sit down and talk with various people and enjoy some good sports conversation. And being here in Jacksonville, curling maybe isn't one of the most hot topic sports, but I know back in 2018 when the Olympics were going on, the U.S. curling team took the world by storm. So excited to kind of dip into that match a little bit, kind of hear your thoughts on how things went and just general topics on the sport of curling. So if you could, tell me how it is qualifying for the Olympics, going through the worlds, things like that. How does a team become a nationally recognized team?
Well, just to get to the point where you can play at an international level, obviously it's a lifetime of practice and training. But just to get to the Olympics themselves, the qualification process it's a long process. It's qualifying through your points through the World Curling Tour. And then it could be finish at the World Championships too. We have 4 or 5 different criteria that we use to qualify ourselves for the tournament, the Olympic trials itself, which is what actually sends our team to the Olympics. And the country has to qualify for the Olympics too. So we're not guaranteed a spot just because we won gold in 2018 either. The U.S. still has to requalify for the for the Olympics through the World Championships. So if our team finishes, for whatever team we send from our country to Worlds, finishes high enough in the World Championships in the 2 years leading up to the Olympics, then we don't have to go and play in the big tournament that they have for the final couple spots. So it's an auto qualifier. If we're ranked in the top 7, I believe it is, based on 2 years leading into the Olympics themselves. So even the year that we went, 2018, we still had to qualify, even though we were the number one ranked team in the country and had represented the U.S. 3 consecutive years at the World Championships. We still had to win our Olympic trials just to go. So it's a long road for any U.S. team to get there. It's not a selection process or anything like that. You win as a team, and we were fortunate to come through that process and have the opportunity to represent our country at the Olympics.
And it's interesting you mentioned that about the qualifying. Not a lot of people would realize that there's so many years that go into qualifying to get into the Olympics, and you're not automatically qualified just for simply holding the gold medal. So what's the outlook on the, I guess, future for curling in the United States? Is it positive? Like, was this, a shot in the dark? Was this a flash in the pan? Or is curling in the U.S. really becoming a stronghold in the Winter Olympic sports?
For our continued success at the Olympics, it's tough to say. I mean, the rest of the world has gotten so much better. Like, the field is so much deeper than it was even in 2014. And especially 2010, 2006, the bottom of the field teams were a lot weaker and basically guaranteed wins for the top. And that's not the case anymore. Even you look at the Olympics in 2018, the team that finished second to last was the world silver medalist from 2016. So it's just not possible to walk through a field like that, even for the top teams like Sweden and Canada. But you're seeing a lot more interest in the United States now because of our success, which is my favorite part about everything that's happened, is that we get to bring our sport to the masses. And through my role as ambassador for USA Curling, I get to have a big part in that. And I get to see it firsthand. And even visiting places like Jacksonville and Orlando, West Palm Beach, all have curling clubs down there that I visited last year for work. And that's not so bad when my old team is up in Saskatoon in 3 feet of snow and I send them pictures from the pool in West Palm. And it's a pretty good gig, but the numbers across the country are growing. And that's only going to help our talent pool for the future and help us try to stay on top of the podium. And it's going to be a long haul for the guys that are still playing, because there are so many good elite teams out there now. But the more people we get involved in sport, the more we grow club membership, the more we get people interested in it. That's just going to help us down the road. And we're going to see the dividends, I think, and more for the following Olympics, the 2026 and 2030 games, as opposed to the 2022 games, which will still be most of the same elite teams that you've seen over the last 4 to 8 years in the U.S.
And you mentioned that Sweden team, you mentioned the Canadian team. Actually, this past Olympics, if I'm correct in saying this was the first Winter Olympics that Canada did not medal in the sport of curling since it got reintroduced into the sport back in 1998, or back into the Olympics in 1998. So you talk about that type of parity within the sport. We've already seen it this past Olympics, where Canada didn't medal even in the bronze medal match. So the U.S. has now, I guess, captured 2 medals in curling since 1998, with 2006 winning the bronze in Turin, Italy, and then obviously 2018 winning the gold in the gold medal match against Sweden, which is right here behind me, which I do want to get into briefly. An amazing match. It was tied 5-5 going into the 8th end, I want to say. And then the floodgates opened up, and Schuster had a throw at the end of the end that set the U.S. up for the gold medal. Take me through your thoughts, or what was going through your minds during that end, and I guess right there afterwards, trying to hold your focus, knowing what had just happened.
Yeah, it's a really interesting end, because the 5 points, it's incredibly dramatic. It's not something that either of us could have possibly expected to happen in this situation. But the reason that something like that happens is because, and Nicholas had a quote about this after the game too, that it really didn't matter if it was 2 points or 5 points, we're probably going to win. So once you get in a situation where you don't think you can bail and play defense, then it's all out offense, and they had to take chances. So once it looked like it was going to be 2-3 points, then that's how it turns into 5, because they have to get ultra aggressive. And we could kind of feel it coming the entire end too. When we got our third counter in the rings, the one that's in the outside, the biter, that was kind of a plan B type of shot where we weren't really trying to make it the way that we did. That's when we started looking at it, and we saw they had 1 rock in. We have 3 rocks in. We have hammer, the last shot. So we have a big advantage that far into the end. And the mics even caught me going back down the sheet, saying to Matt Hamilton that it's getting lonely in there, like that rock is getting awful lonely. So we knew that their margin for error got really small halfway through the end, and that they were going to have to play more aggressive than they normally would in that situation. And that's not something that you want to do when you don't have the last shot. That's a major advantage for us, obviously. So to expect to score something like 4 or 5 points would be crazy. You know, it's the second biggest end ever scored in Olympic history, let alone the gold medal game. So even though we could still feel it coming, we're really just hoping to score 2 or 3, and we feel like we're going to win the game there. So Nicholas, once he gets to the end and he realizes, yeah, we're looking at 3, 4, 5, he's still trying to steal 1 or somehow force us to 1, and that'd be a victory for him. But the shots just kind of came down the way they did, and then John had a relatively makeable shot for that 5. You know, it's the big dramatic moment, but it's a shot I would expect him to make, and obviously it's a lot different throwing it with the top of the podium at stake. Because if we score 5, we know that's game over. You know, normally the other team would probably concede at that point. But sitting in the house waiting for that shot to come down, and you know, thinking to yourself, I don't remember thinking very many things during the game, but I remember sitting there waiting for John to throw that shot and just saying to myself, you know, like, come on, Johnny, one time, just throw her good. And when he let it go, it was exactly where it needed to be out of hand. So as long as the line did what we thought it would do, and we called the sweep correctly, then we were going to make the shot. And we had a little margin for error with that one too, because if it did over curl and we didn't make the double, we still scored 2, which probably still makes us 80-90% to win the game.
And it's interesting you mentioned that about it was a makeable shot for Schuster. Obviously, here it is right behind me for those that want to see
Yeah.
it. Perfect timing having it right here on the screen, so I'll let it sit here for a second.
That's very professional to time that out that way. That's
right.
Impressive.
So he gets the double takeout. There's the smile on his face. Obviously, America at this point knows the match is pretty much over. Obviously, you as athletes within the sport know that it's pretty much over. But you mentioned, you know, it's a makeable shot. What is the pressure like when it comes down to these types of shots? Is it pretty systematic how the throwing works? Is it just muscle memory? How does that work as far as the pressure goes in handling that?
Well, ideally it's muscle memory. That's what you practice as a team and as an individual your entire life for, is to be in that moment and have it be reflex. And it's not an easy thing to do, just to shut your brain off and be able to let your body take over and do what you've done a million times. So, you know, if that's a shot that you're throwing by yourself in practice or in a league game, then you're probably going to feel really confident. But if you can shut out everything else and just focus on the little things and go through your routines, that's the biggest thing. Don't get out of your routines. Don't get out of your rhythm. Do the same things that you would normally do on any shot. And hopefully then you can block out the cameras, the noise, the situation, the pressure. It's all there. It's not that we don't know it's not. But I think the biggest reason why we won that game was because we handled the pressure of that situation better than the Swedes did. And it didn't hurt that we had their number. We were 4-1 against them in the last 2 years. So even though we were underdogs on paper, that was the one team we wanted to play in that game. And that made us feel really comfortable going out and taking the ice. The Canadians in the semi was our mountain. Like to beat them again after beating them in the round robin was the tall task to us. Once we got to the final, I mean, if you would have told us before the week that we're playing Sweden for gold, we would have said, let's go. No, that's the one we want. And it's funny, you know, talking about the pressure of the situation, like for 8 ends, we had total tunnel vision. Like we didn't execute perfectly all the time, but we made big shots and we stepped up in big moments. But I don't really remember thinking very many things for the first 8 ends. But after 8th, when you get 5, that's not something that you could be prepared for. And all of a sudden it's, good God, you know, we're probably going to win this thing if we don't, you know, fall all over ourselves. And it's impossible for those thoughts not to creep in. So the final 4 shots that I threw in that game, I can remember exactly what I was thinking, but I don't remember anything before that. And it's basically just don't fall down, don't mess up, you know, and because it's just not something that you could have been prepared for. So I missed my first shot in the 9th end, the one following the 8th. It was my only complete miss of the game. I played one of the best games of my life, but I threw a rock badly because I got out of my routine. I got too anxious to get it over with and throw it, even though it was a fairly simple shot, and I missed. And then I took my time on the next one, or actually it was, my second shot of the ninth. Then, so I made the first and missed the second, but then I had two very similar shots in the 10th to finish. And it was really just stay upright, just get the rock out of your hand, but still take your time. And once we had those done, you could just see it wash over us, the realization that it's really over now. There's nothing left to do. And playing a team like Sweden, you don't expect to be in that situation either. You would think that it's going to be tight right down to the end, and for 8 ends it was. But having that cushion when everything's on the table, I think it really would have been easier to make those shots at the end of the game if it was a closer game, honestly, because then you're still just in that same tunnel vision and you never leave it at any point. But the 5-point end throws you off of it so much, and trying to recollect yourself and refocus and not get out of those routines, that was the toughest part of that whole game. Once you get on the ice and you get started, then you're comfortable. You're just playing another game. But once it's right there for the taking and it, then that's when all those thoughts come rushing in. That's when the mental struggle really starts.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that cushion, because I would imagine after something like that, it's easy to lose focus a little bit. Luckily, it happened in the 8th end, so you only had 2 ends left to get through, and you had that 5-point cushion, which, like you said, was very much unexpected. 1 in the gold medal match, 2 against the Swedes, and the Swedish women went on to win the gold medal, actually, I think the next night, would have been that same day out there in PyeongChang, but they went on to win the gold, the women did. So you guys kept the Swedes from capturing both the men's and the women's, which is obviously a nice little feather in the cap, I guess you could say. But I do want to ask you just a few questions, brief answers, just about the sport itself. When it comes down to it, I know a lot of people maybe don't know the specifics behind curling, so you've done a good job kind of painting the picture of the sport itself. But the stone itself, how much does the stone weigh? Heavy? Is it easy to throw? How does that work?
Stones generally weigh around 42 pounds. It could be a little bit lighter, a little bit heavier, depending on the club you're playing in, but 42 is what most stones are. And if you picked it up and carried it around, you think, how would you even move this thing, like when you're playing on the ice? But you'd be surprised how easily the stones actually move on the ice surface. So there's only a very small running surface that touches the ice for the rock itself. But and you can tell just from watching guys slide and throw the rock, like how easily it actually moves down the sheet. And some sheets are faster than others. Some are slower. Some rocks are faster and slower than others. Some curl more than others. Some are straighter. So, we have to learn the sets too. So we have books on these rocks, especially for major competitions. But anybody could throw a rock. Like if you're big enough to do it, I'd say like a 9-10-year-old kid is about, the age where you should be able to move it fairly easily. Doesn't mean that you could throw it as hard as some of the pros, but just for getting the rock to the other end and trying to get it into the house, it's about 140 feet sheet. But we were able to get the rock down without much trouble. And that's one of the great things about our sport is it's kind of like golf in that anybody can do it at some level. It's a lot more physically demanding than it looks like. Sweeping is incredibly difficult. The balance that it takes to throw a 42-pound stone down a sheet of ice while sliding on a Teflon or steel slider is much more difficult than you'd think too. But once you've gotten the hang of the basics, you have some kind of modicum of understanding of it, then it is like golf where you can play league. You can play and make any random shot fairly early on, but mastering the game and getting all the ins and outs of it and the nuance and the strategy and the consistency is, again, similar to golf. And you did it once, but can you do it again? Can you do it again? Can you do it again? Okay, can you do it when there's pressure? Can you make this shot, this turn? Can you read the ice? Can you read the rocks? There's just so many tiny little things that go into playing at this level where we were. But the great part about being an ambassador for the sport and taking people out to try it is that, number one, they get a healthy appreciation of how difficult it is, because the only time that people really see it for the most part is during the Olympics. So if the only time you watch a sport is when the best in the world are doing it, then it's probably going to look pretty easy. But then you go out and try it and you say, okay, it's nothing like what we thought it was. And and people really get hooked really fast. And it's not just the game itself, but the community of people. You know, if you're a member at a curling club, they bring you in with open arms from day one. And it doesn't matter where you're from, anything like that. It's not a cliquey sport at all. You have friends and family in every city where there's a curling club. Curlers all stick together. The Swedes that we played against for gold, two of the guys came to my teammate's wedding the previous summer before we played them. We still play fantasy football with the Canadian guys. You know, it's a really tight knit group, top to bottom, and it never stops even through the elite levels of the sport. And the game itself gets you hooked, but then the community is what keeps you around.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that type of relationship. I'm sure actually being at the Olympics and being around these guys so frequently year in and year out, and then, you know, every 4 years at the Olympics creates that type of community you talk about and makes the sport more enjoyable just to be a part of. So it's definitely cool you mentioned that. As far as the brooms go, are both brooms used for the same reasoning, I guess, to slow the rock down, to speed it up? How do the brooms, I guess, factor in the sweeping factor into the sport itself?
Well, you can't slow a rock down with sweeping. So that's why they always say that the best misses are short or light, because if you throw it too hard, then all you can do is watch it. There's nothing you can do. Like if you're trying to get it to stop in a specific place, if you're throwing for line, then you can make the rock curl a little bit. This is a newer development in the sport, but very little. And it's a lot easier to hold a rock straight with sweeping than it is to make it curl. So still the best misses are on the narrow side, on the light side, but wide and heavy. They always say wide and heavy is the worst miss in curling because there's nothing you can do to help it. So you're throwing to sweepers as much as possible so that they can have the most effect. The best sweepers in the world can probably carry a rock up to 12 feet, which is the entire diameter of the house. So if you throw a rock too hard, again, you're just kind of walking with it. You can't do anything about it. But sweepers can read the weight. They can say, okay, we think we need to go on this to make it go as far as we want to. Or if it's not thrown with the right velocity for a hit, then the slower a rock goes, the more it curls. So if a rock is thrown too soft, then it might over curl too. So that's what the yelling is about all the time, that communication between the shooter, the sweeper, and the skip, the guy in the house, because they're talking about the line of the shot. They're talking about the weight of the shot. Because let's say you throw a rock that looks like it's going to be thrown too hard on a hit, so it's not going to curl as much, but it's also thrown on a tight line, then you probably still don't need to sweep it because it's going to curl less, but you don't need it to curl as much because the line is tighter. So that constant communication between the sweepers and the skip and the shooters is what makes shots. So the teams that do that the best, it's not even necessarily the guys that throw the rock the best, but it's the ones that manage each shot and communicate the best and read the ice the best. So all these factors go into each and every shot that we throw, even the simple ones. So that's why you never hear somebody just throw a shot and it's dead quiet. You know, there's always some kind of communication, even if it's saying that we're on the right path, you know, everything's good. Then the sweepers are saying that the weight's good, and the skip's probably saying something like clean. Like that just means brush in front of the rock, make sure nothing gets underneath it because we're right where we need to be.
And I'm glad you brought up the yelling and stuff. Obviously, watching at home, I have no idea what the yelling is all about, as I'm sure very few people do unless they are in the sport of curling. But it is fun to just be able to yell at the TV with whatever else is being yelled on the ice, and no idea what it means, but it's fun to do. Makes you feel like you're involved in it and everything. But Tyler, it's been great talking to you. My last question, more of a funny question for you. Is there a specific title for the first, throw of a curling match, something that signifies almost like a first pitch in baseball or kickoff start time in football? Is there something like that for curling?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you that there was, but no, there is no specific name for the first shot of a game. It's just really the first shot. So if you want to coin one and come up with one yourself, maybe it'll stick. But yeah, there is no name for the first shot of the game. It's just the first shot. So we'll put that on you. If you can come up with a good one, we'll see if we can get it to trend or catch on. Yeah,
so there's been a lot of kind of thoughts through my head about this because I've always felt like there needs to be one. But just through myself and some friends at the office that I work at, we've considered the first slide to be the first throw of the game. So you come in the office, hey, when's first slide today? It's an easier way to say when's the curling match start. So if we could petition to get first slide as the official, I guess, term to be used for the first throw, that would be fantastic. And you have a lot more say in it than I do, so I would need your help with this. But I'm fully on board with the first slide.
All right, you get it up on Twitter, and we'll see if we can get it trending. We'll see if we can get some support behind this movement. I'm a big fan of grassroots stuff, so let's see if we can do it. We'll work together.
Awesome. Well, sounds good, Tyler. Thanks again for being here, and you stay safe through these times. And looking forward to getting back out on the, I guess, curling sheet for yourselves and being able to watch some curling myself on TV here in the coming years with the 2022 Olympics set to take place still. So excited for that, but thanks again for being here.
Happy to do it, man. Be well. Be safe.
How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man?